Welcome in, everybody, to another deep dive. We love to really get into some interesting stuff, and I think this one is going to be particularly fascinating and maybe a little bit unsettling.
Yeah,
We're talking about cults and manipulative behavior.
right.
And we've got this really interesting mix of sources today, some academic excerpts, some personal accounts, even some historical analysis. So by the end of this, you should be much better equipped to spot those tricky dynamics that we're going to talk about.
Yeah, what's interesting is that even just the word cult is tricky. Like, it's so loaded
Oh, yeah.
with negative connotations.
Yeah.
And trying to pin down, like, an exact definition is surprisingly difficult.
So how do experts even approach this? I mean, did they just go by vibes?
Not exactly. There was a French government report from 2001 that actually moved away from strict definitions and focused more on harmful activities.
Okay.
So it's less about the label and more about the impact.
That makes a lot of sense. It's kind of like judging a tree by its fruit, not just its name.
Yeah.
But how does that actually work in practice?
Yeah. Well, that report highlighted these things called the Mandel Decrees, which were issued before World War II.
Okay.
And they were initially meant to give the French government some oversight on religious missions. But some groups today are actually twisting them to seem more legitimate
Oh, wow.
and even score tax benefits.
So using a bit of legal maneuvering to gain an air of respectability, kind of sneaky.
Yeah.
Which brings us to one of the groups that we're looking at today, the Science of Identity Foundation, or SIF. They were formerly known as Iwarada, which stands for Mishra Zaitani, and are led by a guy named Chris Butler, also known as Siddhiswarupananda Paramahamsa.
Wow, that's a mouthful.
Yeah, it is. Now, the thing is, there's this connection to Tulsi Gabbard.
Yes, Tulsi Gabbard, the American
Uh,
politician.
Right.
Her involvement with SIF has definitely raised eyebrows and sparked a lot of debate.
And it gets even more complicated. We've had listeners write in about how Butler seems to have vanished from public view.
Oh, really?
Some are even comparing him to, wait for it, Ted Bundy.
It's a stark comparison for sure.
It's a little unnerving, right?
Yeah, and it really highlights the anxiety surrounding him.
Yeah, exactly. And on top of that, there are some serious accusations from ex-members against SIF. They're claiming everything from financial exploitation to a secret caste system and some very manipulative recruitment tactics.
Yeah, it's important to take these accusations seriously.
Mm-hmm.
One story that really stuck with me was a family whose daughter, Kazia, tragically passed away while involved with SIF.
Oh, that's awful. What happened?
Well, the family discovered a statement that Kazi wrote where she insisted her involvement was completely voluntary.
Okay.
But at the same time, they'd observed some pretty concerning changes in her behavior leading up to her death.
So it's this confusing mix of her stating one thing, but her family witnessing something else entirely.
Yeah,
That's heartbreaking.
absolutely. And to add another layer of complexity, there are these Facebook posts detailing how the group sold off properties and then the funds just seem to have disappeared.
Okay, so we're talking potential financial irregularities, allegations of manipulation, and a leader who's gone off the grid. It sounds like this soft group might be using some pretty classic cult tactics, wouldn't you say?
It's certainly starting to look that way.
Hmm.
To understand how these groups operate, it's helpful to look at the psychology behind manipulation.
Mm-hmm.
There's a book called Dangerous Persuaders that dives into how our arousal levels, when we're anxious, excited, or scared, can directly affect our ability to think critically.
So basically, when our emotions are running high, we're more likely to just accept things without really thinking them through.
Yeah.
I can definitely see that happen.
Exactly. The book gives this really vivid example of a kid who develops a fear of large, dark shapes after being bitten by a dog.
Okay.
That fear gets locked in because it formed during a moment of intense stress.
So even if it doesn't logically make sense, those beliefs can really stick with us.
Yeah.
That's a bit scary when you think about it, but how can we guard against that?
Well, another book, How to Break the Cycle of Manipulation, argues that self-awareness is key. Recognizing your own vulnerabilities is crucial for resisting manipulation.
So knowing what makes you tick, what your weaknesses are.
Exactly. The book calls them buttons of vulnerability.
Yeah.
Things like craving approval or fearing abandonment.
Right.
These are the things manipulators can press to try and gain control.
It seems like understanding these buttons is a crucial first step in protecting ourselves. This book also talks about specific personality types, right? Like the approval addict.
Yes, that's someone who's constantly seeking validation.
Right.
The book explains how manipulators might exploit that by threatening to withhold approval if they don't get their way. It's almost like holding their emotional stability hostage.
Oh, wow, that's heavy.
It is.
It's interesting how these techniques can be so subtle and insidious. And then there's the whole world of passive-aggressive manipulation, which, let's be honest, is one of the most frustrating things to deal with.
Oh, for sure.
But this book offers some hope, right? What are some of the steps it outlines for breaking free from manipulation?
It provides 7 key steps, and I think one of the most empowering ones is learning to say no effectively.
Mm.
It sounds simple, but it can be incredibly difficult for people who are prone to manipulation. They might feel guilty, scared, or even obligated to say yes, even when it goes against their own needs and wants.
That makes a lot of sense. Saying no is a powerful way to set a boundary and take back control. What are some of the other steps?
Well, there's a big focus on desensitization techniques. These help you manage the anxiety and fear that manipulators often try to trigger.
Okay.
It's about learning to stay calm and collected in those high-pressure situations.
So, kind of like training yourself not to react emotionally to their tactics.
Precisely. And it also stresses the importance of correcting those self-defeating thoughts. It's about cultivating self-reliance and breaking free from those negative thought patterns that can make you more susceptible to manipulation.
So, building up your own inner strength and sense of self worth, it seems like that would make you less reliant on external validation and less likely to be swayed by a manipulator's tactics.
Exactly. It's about reclaiming your power and becoming the author of your own story.
So, we've talked about some pretty intense stuff, allegations against Sif, the psychology of manipulation steps to break free. It's a lot to process. Before we move on, let's take a moment to reflect on what we've learned so far. What stands out to you?
For me, it's the tragic story of Kazuya and the importance of recognizing the warning signs of manipulation, especially within groups that claim to offer spiritual guidance.
Right.
It's also crucial to remember that even though we're talking about these heavy topics, knowledge is power. Understanding these dynamics can help you protect yourself and those you care about.
I completely agree. It's about being informed and aware, not about living in fear.
Right. It's about empowering yourself to make informed decisions and to navigate the complexities of human relationships with greater confidence.
Now, shifting gears a bit, let's explore a concept that's often associated with spiritual traditions. Guru Bhakti Yoga. It's essentially a path to enlightenment through devotion to a guru.
Right?
What do you know about that?
It's a fascinating concept, but one that can be easily misunderstood or even misused. One of our sources dives deep into Guru Bhakti Yoga. But what I find intriguing is that it presents these seemingly contradictory ideas.
Well, like what?
While on one hand, it emphasizes the absolute necessity of a guru's grace for achieving liberation.
Okay.
But then it also suggests that after serving a guru for a long time, a calm mind actually becomes your true guru.
So which is it? Do you need a guru or not?
That's the paradox, right?
Okay.
It raises this really interesting question about agency and self-reliance within the guru-disciple relationship.
Right.
Where does the guru's authority end and the disciple's own inner guidance begin?
That's a really good question. It's like, how much do you surrender to the guru and how much do you retain your own autonomy? It seems like finding that balance is key.
Absolutely. And that's something we'll continue to explore as we delve deeper into the world of gurus and spiritual seeking. But first, let's take a look at a specific example that illustrates this tension between guru devotion and independent thought. The story of Ananta Vasudeva.
Okay, tell me more about him.
Ananta Vasudeva was a prominent figure in the Gaudiya math, which is a Vaishnava tradition. But here's the thing. He eventually rejected his guru's authority, and his dissent had a huge impact.
Oh, wow.
It sent shockwaves through the Gaudiya math and continues to influence devotees even today.
So he went against the grain and people are still talking about it.
Exactly.
What were his reasons for breaking away?
His decision stemmed from his deep understanding of the original teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the founder of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. He felt his guru was deviating from these core principles.
It sounds like he was a real independent thinker, someone who wasn't afraid to challenge the status quo even within a spiritual context.
Exactly, and his story is a reminder that critical thinking is crucial, even in realms that emphasize faith and devotion. Blindly following a guru without question can be dangerous.
Right. His story really illustrates that tension between guru devotion and personal discernment. Do you have any examples of how his dissenting views are still impacting people today?
Absolutely. There's this anecdote about a disciple of Srila Prabhupada, the founder of ISKCON, another branch of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. This disciple had actually traded a whole collection of Prabhupada's books for the writings of Ananta Vasudeva.
Whoa! He gave up those books for Ananta Vasudeva's perspective. That's a pretty bold move. What happened?
But when Prabhupada found out, he was furious and demanded his disciple retrieve his books immediately.
So even within a different lineage of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, Ananta Vasudeva's views were seen as a threat. It really speaks to the power of his ideas and how they continue to resonate with people.
It also highlights how sensitive the topic of spiritual authority can be, and it underscores the importance of critical thinking and questioning even deeply held beliefs.
So we've gone from examining the allegations against Sif to exploring the complex world of Guru Bhakti Yoga. It feels like we've covered a lot of ground already, but before we dive into the next layer, what are some of the key takeaways for our listeners so far?
I'd say the biggest one is that manipulation can be subtle, and it can occur even in contexts that we might consider safe or trustworthy, like spiritual groups. Recognizing the tactics and being aware of your own vulnerabilities are crucial first steps in protecting yourself.
It's also important to remember that questioning authority, even spiritual authority, is not a sign of disrespect. It's a sign of critical thinking and a healthy desire to align your beliefs with your own understanding.
Absolutely. It's about finding that balance between respecting tradition and trusting your own inner compass.
And we'll be back after a short break to explore even more about this.
Yeah, I'm excited to get into it.
I keep thinking back to Kazia's story. It's a stark reminder that the dangers of cults are very real and the impact can be absolutely devastating.
Yeah, it's true. Kazia's case really highlights how manipulation can chip away at a person's sense of self and their ability to make independent choices. Her family's struggle to understand her changing behavior speaks volumes about the power these groups can have.
It makes you realize how important it is to understand the different tactics of manipulation. We touched on dangerous persuaders, but it feels like we just scratched the surface. The world of manipulation is so vast and complex. There must be tons of techniques out there.
Absolutely. One tactic we see often is love bombing. It's this overwhelming outpouring of affection and attention, often used to draw people into a group or a relationship. Think of it like being showered with compliments and promises, making you feel incredibly special and wanted.
It sounds almost intoxicating, like you're being swept off your feet.
Exactly. It creates this sense of belonging and euphoria, making it that much harder to see any red flags.
Mm.
And often love bombing goes hand in hand with another tactic, isolation. Manipulators will try to separate their target from their support system, family, friends, anyone who might offer a different perspective.
So they're cutting off any outside influence that might challenge their hold on the person.
Precisely by creating dependency on the group or the manipulator, they gain more and more control. And then there's gaslighting. This one is just insidious. It's a form of psychological manipulation where the victim is made to doubt their own sanity and perceptions.
It's like that saying, making someone think they're crazy.
Exactly. They deny reality, twist facts, and make the victim feel like they're losing their grip. It's all about sowing seeds of doubt and confusion.
Knowing about these tactics feels crucial for building up our defenses. The more we understand these patterns, the better equipped we are to protect ourselves, right?
Absolutely. Knowledge is power when it comes to resisting manipulation.
Now let's loop back to Guru Bhakti Yoga for a moment. We talked about those seemingly contradictory ideas about a guru's role, but there's another layer I'm curious about. The emphasis on service to the guru. What does that actually look like in practice?
That's a core part of this path. It's the belief that by serving the guru with utter devotion, the disciple purifies their mind and advances spiritually.
Our source on this actually lists a whole bunch of practices connected to service, things like worshiping the guru's feet, constantly chanting their name, meditating on their image, even consuming their leftovers.
All of those are seen as acts of love and surrender, aimed at forging a deep connection with the guru.
But here's where things get tricky for me. Doesn't this intense focus on service create an environment where exploitation could easily occur? If a disciple is fully devoted and surrendered, wouldn't it be simple for a less than scrupulous guru to take advantage?
That's a valid concern, and it's precisely why discernment is paramount. We have to remember that true spirituality should empower the individual, not control them.
So how can someone find that balance? How do you reconcile the need for guidance with the importance of critical thinking and personal autonomy, especially in a spiritual context?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It requires careful consideration. Blind faith without any questioning can lead to some pretty precarious situations.
Are there any red flags people should be aware of?
One huge one is a guru who demands absolute obedience and shuts down any form of questioning or disagreement. That's a hallmark of a controlling personality, not a genuine spiritual guide. A true guru will encourage their disciples to think critically and develop their own understanding.
That makes a lot of sense. It's about fostering a healthy relationship, not a dictatorship. Now, bringing this back to the Science of Identity Foundation, I think it's time we examine them through the lens of cult characteristics. There's this Bonewitz cult danger scale outlined in Spirituality 21.
Ah, yes, it assigns points based on 15 different characteristics, with a higher score suggesting a higher level of danger. So how does SIFE measure up?
It's hard to say definitively without more information, but based on what we know so far, some warning signs are definitely flashing. For instance, there's that heavy emphasis on the authority of the leader, Chris Butler. Ex-members have described a culture of unquestioning obedience, and anyone who dissents is often shunned or punished.
Those are definitely concerning elements. And what about the allegations of financial exploitation? We've got those property sales, and there's still so many questions about their financial transparency.
Right. And there are claims of financial irregularities and pressure on members to contribute large sums. It all adds up to another red flag.
And then there's the isolation factor. SUF seems to encourage its members to limit contact with the outside world, especially anyone who might criticize the group.
That's classic cult behavior, creating that bubble where opposing views are silenced. And let's not forget the personal accounts we've heard about manipulation and emotional abuse. Those stories paint a very troubling picture of control and coercion.
It's important to note that at this point, these are allegations, and we haven't heard SUF's side of the story. But all these factors together definitely raise concerns about their practices.
It's a reminder that cults can exist in so many forms, and they aren't always easy to spot. Speaking of groups that can be hard to pin down, let's shift our focus to QNet.
Ah, QNet. This is a multi-level marketing company that's been accused of operating as a pyramid scheme.
And it's a prime example of how manipulation can creep into a business context. QNet lures people in with promises of financial freedom and a luxurious lifestyle.
They prey on people's aspirations for wealth and success, often targeting those who are struggling financially and looking for a way out.
And the way they operate is strikingly similar to a cult. There's this huge emphasis on recruitment, with members pressured to bring in new recruits to earn commissions.
It sets up a system where people are essentially incentivized to exploit their own social circles. Friendships and family relationships are put at risk.
And just like in a cult, QNet uses indoctrination techniques to control its members. They hold these high-energy seminars and workshops, bombarding people with motivational speeches and what seem like glowing testimonials.
It's all about creating a high-pressure environment where critical thinking is discouraged and dissent is met with hostility. And often the products themselves are overpriced and of questionable quality. The real focus is on recruitment, not on actually selling anything of value.
Which is why so many experts classify QNet as a pyramid scheme. The money comes from recruiting new members, not from legitimate sales. And the financial fallout for those involved can be devastating. People invest their savings, take out loans, rack up credit card debt to join QNet, only to find themselves worse off than before.
It's a classic bait and switch. They dangle the promise of riches, but the reality is that most people end up losing money.
And the psychological impact can be just as destructive. People who manage to break free from QNet often feel betrayed and ashamed, realizing they've been manipulated and exploited by people they trusted.
It just goes to show that manipulation can happen anywhere, not just within religious or spiritual groups. It can infiltrate any aspect of our lives.
It's a reminder to stay vigilant and to always question systems that seem too good to be true. Now let's turn our attention to a topic that's been making headlines and sparking heated debates: the abortion debate. We've seen a surge in attacks on abortion clinics.
This is a highly sensitive and complex issue, and there are deeply held beliefs on both sides of the spectrum.
Absolutely, and it's crucial that we approach this conversation with sensitivity and respect for everyone's perspective. Our goal isn't to take sides here, but to understand the different viewpoints and the historical context.
One of our sources chronicles a long history of violence and intimidation targeting abortion clinics, ranging from acts of vandalism and arson to terrifying incidents of bombings and even shootings.
It's a sobering reminder of the lengths some individuals will go to impose their beliefs on others.
It's vital to acknowledge the fear and trauma experienced by those who work at these clinics and by the individuals seeking their services.
These attacks are often fueled by the belief that abortion is morally wrong, even equivalent to murder.
And some groups draw on religious justifications for their actions, citing biblical passages or emphasizing the sanctity of life from the moment of conception.
On the other side of the debate are those who firmly believe that women have an inherent right to control their own bodies and make autonomous decisions about their reproductive health.
They argue that access to safe and legal abortion is essential for women's well-being, and that outlawing abortion doesn't eliminate the practice. It simply makes it far more dangerous.
It's a deeply complex issue with no easy answer.
Absolutely. But it's a conversation we need to have, and we need to engage in it with empathy and understanding.
It's about finding common ground, even when we disagree fundamentally. Now, since we're already in the territory of potentially charged topics, let's wade into another area where manipulation runs rampant: politics.
Politics, the art of persuasion, or sometimes perhaps the art of deception.
Right. It's no secret that politicians employ all sorts of tactics to sway public opinion and win elections.
They use sophisticated marketing strategies, carefully craft their speeches, and sometimes resort to outright propaganda to achieve their goals.
And social media has become this incredibly potent tool for political manipulation. We've all seen how misinformation and disinformation can spread like wildfire online.
Absolutely fake news articles, doctored images, bot accounts can all be weaponized to influence voters and even undermine democratic processes.
It's a stark reminder that we need to be very critical consumers of information, especially during election cycles.
We need to fact check, consider multiple perspectives, and be wary of those emotionally charged appeals designed to bypass our critical thinking.
It's our responsibility to be informed citizens and to hold our elected officials accountable.
And to engage in respectful dialogue, even when we disagree vehemently.
Now let's shift gears and explore another fascinating dimension of manipulation: the power of language.
Language is such a potent tool. It can be used to inform, inspire, but also to deceive and manipulate.
One of our sources delves into the world of NLP, which stands for Neuro-Linguistic Programming.
NLP encompasses a set of techniques aimed at influencing people's thoughts, feelings, and actions through language patterns and communication styles.
It's been used in therapy, sales, and, well, let's just say some less than ethical applications.
Right. Some individuals, unfortunately, use NLP for personal gain to manipulate and control others.
One NLP technique often employed in manipulation is called framing. It's all about presenting information in a way that slants how it's perceived.
For example, a politician might frame a tax cut as giving money back to the people, even though it disproportionately benefits the wealthy.
Or a company might frame layoffs as streamlining operations, even though it means people are losing their jobs.
It's all about using language to spin a narrative and elicit specific emotional responses.
Another NLP technique is anchoring. This involves associating a particular emotion or state of mind with a specific word phrase or even a physical touch.
For instance, a manipulator might use a specific phrase every time they want to trigger feelings of insecurity or self-doubt in someone.
It's a subtle form of conditioning that can be incredibly effective.
The key takeaway here is to be aware of these techniques and to recognize when they're being used on you.
And to remember that we always have the power to choose how we respond to language and how we allow it to affect us.
Exactly. Self-awareness gives you the freedom to make conscious choices and protect yourself from manipulation.
Speaking of things that can influence our thinking, let's venture into the realm of conspiracy theories. They're often dismissed as fringe beliefs, but they can have a powerful grip on people's minds.
Conspiracy theories can provide a sense of order and control in a world that often feels chaotic and unpredictable. They offer these simplistic explanations for complex events, often tapping into people's fears and anxieties.
And social media has become a breeding ground for these theories. They can spread like wildfire online, fueled by algorithms that prioritize engagement over accuracy.
Absolutely. And once someone falls down that rabbit hole of a particular conspiracy theory, it can be extremely difficult to pull them back out. They become increasingly distrustful of mainstream information and more susceptible to misinformation and disinformation.
It highlights how crucial critical thinking is in today's world.
We need to be skeptical of claims that seem too good to be true, or that perfectly align with our existing biases. And we need to be open to considering evidence that challenges our beliefs.
Conspiracy theories can be harmful not just to individuals, but to society as a whole. They can erode trust in institutions, fuel extremism, and even incite violence.
It's important to engage with people who hold these beliefs with empathy and understanding. Try to understand the underlying fears and anxieties driving their beliefs, and focus on building bridges rather than reinforcing divisions.
It's a good reminder that we're all susceptible to manipulation in different ways, and we need to look out for each other. Now let's shift gears and delve into the world of social psychology.
Social psychology explores how our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are shaped by the presence of others.
One of our sources discusses the Milgram experiment, a classic study on obedience to authority.
The Milgram experiment demonstrated that ordinary people are capable of inflicting pain on others when instructed to do so by an authority figure.
It's a chilling reminder of the power of social pressure and the dangers of blindly following orders.
It helps us understand how people can be manipulated into committing acts of violence or cruelty.
Another important concept in social psychology is groupthink.
Groupthink happens when a group prioritizes harmony and consensus over critical thinking and sound decision-making.
It can lead to disastrous outcomes as the group becomes insulated from dissenting viewpoints and makes choices that aren't in their best interests.
It's crucial to foster open communication and encourage dissent within groups.
And to be mindful of the dangers of groupthink, especially when there's pressure to conform, social psychology also explores the concept of cognitive dissonance.
Cognitive dissonance is that mental discomfort we feel when we hold two or more conflicting beliefs, ideas, or values.
And we often try to reduce that discomfort by changing our beliefs or behaviors to align with each other.
For example, if someone smokes but knows it's harmful, they might rationalize it by saying they'll quit soon, or that they only smoke occasionally.
That makes sense. We try to find ways to justify our actions even when they contradict our beliefs.
Cognitive dissonance can be exploited by manipulators who use techniques to create that sense of conflict or inconsistency in their target's mind.
So they might present information that challenges their beliefs or try to get them to act in ways that go against their values.
Exactly. This can create mental confusion and make people more susceptible to persuasion and manipulation.
It sounds like self-awareness is key here, recognizing when we're experiencing cognitive dissonance and why.
Absolutely. And remembering that it's perfectly okay to hold conflicting beliefs and to question our own assumptions. Now let's talk about a concept closely related to manipulation: propaganda.
Propaganda is the deliberate spread of information, ideas, or rumors to influence public opinion or behavior.
It's often used by governments, political parties, and other organizations to push their agendas or discredit their opponents.
Propaganda can be subtle or blatant and take many forms, from news articles and speeches to posters and social media posts.
One common technique is name-calling, using negative labels or stereotypes to discredit an opponent or idea.
For instance, a politician might call their opponent a radical or a socialist to evoke fear and distrust in voters.
Another technique is bandwagoning, appealing to people's desire to fit in and be part of the majority.
They might use phrases like "everyone knows" or "most people agree" to make their viewpoint seem widely accepted.
It's a way to pressure people to conform to a perceived norm. Propaganda can be extremely effective in shaping public opinion and influencing behavior.
It makes you realize how important it is to be aware of these techniques and to critically evaluate the information we encounter.
We need to question the sources of our information, consider multiple perspectives, and be wary of claims that seem too good to be true or perfectly aligned with our existing biases. Now let's delve into a topic that's both fascinating and disturbing: psychopathy.
Psychopathy is a personality disorder characterized by a lack of empathy, remorse, and guilt.
Psychopaths are often charming and manipulative, and they can be very skilled at exploiting others for personal gain.
They often lack a moral compass and feel no qualms about lying, cheating, or stealing to get what they want.
Psychopaths can be found in all walks of life, even in positions of power and authority.
And they can be very dangerous, as they are often willing to use violence or coercion to achieve their goals.
It's important to be aware of the signs of psychopathy, which can include superficial charm, a grandiose sense of self-worth, lack of empathy, a history of lying and manipulation, and a disregard for rules and social norms.
If you think you might be dealing with a psychopath, it's crucial to protect yourself by setting clear boundaries, documenting their behavior, and seeking support from trusted individuals or professionals.
Absolutely. Now let's discuss a concept that's often misunderstood: brainwashing.
Brainwashing is a process of intense indoctrination that aims to fundamentally change a person's beliefs, values, and behaviors.
It often involves techniques like isolation, sleep deprivation, and psychological torture.
Brainwashing is a tactic used by cults and totalitarian regimes to control their members and quash dissent.
It's a very real phenomenon, but it's also important to acknowledge that it's a complex process that requires specific conditions to be effective. Not everyone who is exposed to brainwashing techniques will succumb to them.
That's reassuring. So are there certain individuals who are more susceptible to these techniques?
People who are particularly vulnerable, such as those who are isolated under extreme stress or have a history of trauma, are more likely to be influenced by brainwashing.
It sounds like understanding the signs is crucial. Are there any red flags we should look out for?
Definitely. Some key indicators include a sudden and drastic change in beliefs or behaviors, a preoccupation with the group or leader, a decline in critical thinking skills, and a fear of leaving the group.
It's chilling to think about the power of these techniques. Now let's move on to another fascinating facet of manipulation, the role of persuasion.
Persuasion is the art of influencing someone's beliefs, attitudes, or actions through communication. It's a skill that can be used for good or for evil.
One of our sources highlights the work of Robert Cialdini, a renowned psychologist who identified 6 principles of persuasion: reciprocity, scarcity, authority, consistency, liking, and consensus.
These principles tap into fundamental human psychology and can be incredibly effective when used skillfully.
Let's break them down. What's reciprocity?
Reciprocity is the principle that we feel obligated to return favors. For example, if someone gives you a gift, you're more likely to feel inclined to give them a gift in return.
That makes sense. It's like an unspoken social contract. What about scarcity?
Scarcity is the principle that we value things that are rare or in limited supply. For instance, if you're told there are only a few tickets left for a concert, you're more likely to buy a ticket.
Ah, the fear of missing out. That's definitely a powerful motivator. What about authority?
Authority is the principle that we're more likely to be persuaded by someone we perceive as an expert or authority figure. For example, if a doctor advises you to take a certain medication, you're more likely to follow their recommendation than if a friend suggested it.
It's about trusting the expertise of someone in a position of authority. What about consistency?
Consistency is the principle that we like to be consistent with our past actions and beliefs. So if you've publicly declared support for a cause, you're more likely to continue supporting it even if doubts creep in.
It's about maintaining a sense of personal integrity and aligning our actions with our stated beliefs. What about liking?
Liking is the principle that we're more likely to be swayed by people we like. It's pretty straightforward. If you like a salesperson, you're more likely to buy something from them.
It's about building rapport and creating a sense of trust. And finally, what about consensus?
Consensus is the principle that we're more likely to do something if we see others doing it. If you see a long line outside a restaurant, you're more likely to want to eat there, assuming the food must be good.
It's the power of social proof. So these principles of persuasion can be used ethically or unethically. It seems like awareness is key here as well.
Absolutely. It's important to recognize these principles so you can spot when they're being used to manipulate you. And remember, you always have the power to make your own decisions.
It's about staying in control of your choices, even when facing powerful persuasive techniques. Now let's turn our attention to a particularly relevant topic in our digital age: online manipulation.
Online manipulation involves using digital technologies to influence thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. It takes many forms, including phishing scams, social media manipulation, and the spread of fake news.
Phishing scams often trick people into revealing personal information like passwords or credit card numbers.
While social media manipulation uses platforms like Facebook and Twitter to spread misinformation, propaganda, or hate speech.
And fake news involves creating and disseminating false information that's disguised as legitimate news.
Online manipulation can be incredibly effective because it exploits vulnerabilities and taps into our emotions.
For example, social media algorithms can target people with specific content designed to trigger emotional responses like fear, anger, or outrage.
This heightened emotional state can make people more likely to share or believe false information without critically evaluating it.
It's a reminder to be extra vigilant online and to approach information with a healthy dose of skepticism.
We need to fact-check, consider multiple sources, and be wary of unfamiliar sources or those we don't trust.
And we should be mindful of our own online behavior, avoiding sharing information that could be used to manipulate others.
Exactly. We all have a responsibility to be critical consumers of information and to promote a culture of accuracy and ethical communication online. Now let's shift gears and talk about a topic that's often overlooked: manipulation in personal relationships.
Manipulation in relationships can be subtle or overt and take many forms. What are some common examples?
One frequent form is emotional blackmail, which involves using threats or guilt trips to control a partner's behavior.
So a manipulator might threaten to break up with their partner if they don't get their way.
Exactly, or they might guilt their partner into doing something by saying, "If you really loved me, you'd do this for me."
It's a way of using emotional pressure to coerce someone into compliance. We also talked about gaslighting earlier, which can be a form of manipulation in relationships as well.
Absolutely. Gaslighting involves denying reality, twisting facts, and making a partner doubt their sanity and perceptions. It can be incredibly damaging to a person's self-esteem and make them feel trapped in the relationship.
It sounds incredibly toxic. Are there any other signs of manipulation in relationships that people should be aware of?
Definitely. Pay attention if you consistently feel controlled or manipulated, if you're constantly walking on eggshells around your partner, or if you find yourself doubting your own perceptions and judgment.
Those are all red flags that something might be amiss in the relationship. What should someone do if they recognize these signs?
It's crucial to seek support from some common indicators include a preoccupation with the group or leader, a loss of critical thinking skills, a fear of leaving the group, and a willingness to cut ties with family and friends who are critical of the group.
What should someone do if they suspect a loved one might be involved in a cult?
It's essential to seek professional help. There are organizations that specialize in helping people leave cults and recover from the trauma of that experience.
It's important to remember that there is help available and people don't have to go through this alone. Now let's talk about a concept closely related to manipulation: deception.
Deception is the act of intentionally misleading someone.
It can take many forms, including lying, withholding information, and exaggerating the truth.
Deception is often used to gain an advantage over someone or avoid negative consequences.
It can be challenging to detect deception, especially when someone is skilled at hiding their true intentions. Are there any clues we can look out for?
While it's not foolproof, pay attention to inconsistencies in their story, a lack of eye contact, and nervous or fidgety behavior. These could be potential indicators of deception.
It sounds like trusting our intuition is important here as well.
Absolutely, if something feels off, it's worth paying attention to that feeling and investigating further. Now let's talk about a concept that's central to understanding manipulation: vulnerability.
Vulnerability is the state of being susceptible to physical or emotional harm.
We're all vulnerable to some extent, as we all have needs and desires that others can exploit.
But some people are more vulnerable than others, like those who are isolated, going through a stressful period, or have a history of trauma.
Manipulators often target vulnerable individuals because they're easier to control and exploit.
So it's essential to be aware of our own vulnerabilities and to take steps to protect ourselves from manipulation.
This can involve building strong support systems, practicing self-care, and seeking professional help if you're struggling with mental health challenges.
It's about building resilience and strengthening our inner defenses. Now let's discuss a concept closely tied to manipulation: power dynamics.
Power dynamics refer to the balance of power in a relationship.
In any relationship, there's a power dynamic at play, whether it's between a boss and an employee, a parent and a child, or even between friends.
Manipulators often seek to exploit power dynamics to their advantage.
They might assert their dominance over others or leverage their position of power to control or coerce them.
It's crucial to be aware of power dynamics in your relationships and to make sure you're not being taken advantage of.
So how can we ensure a healthy balance of power in our relationships?
It involves setting clear boundaries, asserting your needs, and seeking support from others if you feel powerless or unheard.
It's about advocating for yourself and ensuring that your voice is valued. Now let's discuss a concept closely related to manipulation: coercion.
Coercion is the use of force or threats to make someone do something against their will.
It can take many forms, including physical violence, threats of violence, or emotional blackmail.
Coercion is a serious form of abuse that should never be tolerated.
What should someone do if they're experiencing coercion?
It's critical to seek help from trusted individuals or professionals. There are resources available to support victims of coercion and help them navigate their situation safely.
It's important to remember that you're not alone and there is help available. Now let's explore a topic that often comes up when discussing manipulation: mind control.
Mind control is a controversial concept that refers to the use of techniques to manipulate a person's thoughts, feelings, and behaviors.
It's often associated with cults and totalitarian regimes.
While there's no scientific consensus on the existence of mind control, there's evidence to suggest that certain techniques can influence behavior.
What kinds of techniques are we talking about?
Techniques like isolation, sleep deprivation, and psychological torture have been used in attempts to control people's minds.
It's crucial to be aware of the possibility of mind control and to be skeptical of groups or individuals who claim to have the ability to control your thoughts or behaviors.
Absolutely. Critical thinking and maintaining a healthy level of skepticism are your best defenses against potential mind control attempts. Now let's talk about a concept that's closely related to manipulation: self-deception.
Self-deception is the act of deceiving ourselves.
It can involve denying reality, rationalizing bad behavior, or blaming others for our own mistakes.
It sounds like self-deception can be pretty harmful.
It can be because it prevents us from learning from our mistakes and growing as individuals. However, it can also be a coping mechanism that protects our egos and helps us maintain a positive self-image.
So how can we navigate self-deception in a healthy way?
It's important to be aware of our own tendencies towards self-deception and to strive for honesty and self-awareness.
It's about being willing to look at ourselves honestly and to acknowledge our flaws and mistakes. Now let's talk about a concept that's closely related to manipulation: influence.
Influence is the ability to affect someone's thoughts, feelings, or behaviors.
We're all influenced by others to some extent, whether it's by our parents, friends, teachers, or role models.
Influence can be positive or negative,
Positive influence can inspire us to be better or achieve our goals.
while negative influence can lead us to make poor decisions or engage in harmful behaviors.
It sounds like choosing our influences wisely is crucial.
Absolutely, surrounding yourself with positive and supportive people who encourage your growth and well-being is essential.
It's about creating a positive and uplifting social environment for ourselves. Now let's talk about a concept that's often discussed in relation to manipulation: social proof.
Social proof is the principle that we're more likely to do something if we see others doing it. It's a powerful form of influence as it taps into our desire to conform and be part of the group.
Manipulators often use social proof to their advantage. How do they do that?
They create the impression that their viewpoint or product is widely accepted. They might use testimonials, fake reviews, or staged events to create the illusion of popularity.
So it's about creating a false sense of consensus to influence people's choices.
Exactly. It's crucial to be aware of social proof and to recognize when it's being used to manipulate you.
And to remember that popularity doesn't always equate to truth or value. Just because something is popular doesn't mean it's the right choice for you. Wow, we've really journeyed through a whole landscape of manipulative tactics, from love bombing to online scams. It can feel a bit overwhelming.
It's true, there's a lot out there. But the key takeaway here is awareness. The more you understand these patterns, the less likely you are to fall prey to them.
So what are some practical steps people can take to protect themselves? Where do you even begin?
One of the most important things is to cultivate strong, healthy relationships. Having a solid support system, family, friends, mentors, helps you stay grounded and can provide that crucial reality check if things start to feel off.
It's like having people you trust to talk to, bounce ideas off of, get a different perspective.
Exactly. Isolation is a manipulator's best friend.
Mhm.
Another vital strategy is setting clear boundaries. This means learning to say no assertively, even when it feels uncomfortable.
And not letting guilt or pressure sway you into doing things you don't want to do.
Right? You have the right to protect your time, your energy, and your well-being. This next one might sound obvious, but it's so important. Pay attention to your gut feelings. That inner voice often knows when something's not right, even if you can't quite articulate it.
It's like that feeling of, this just doesn't sit well with me.
Exactly. Don't dismiss those feelings. Trust your instincts. And finally, don't be afraid to seek help if you're in a situation that feels manipulative or controlling.
Yeah.
Reach out to a therapist, counselor, or a trusted friend or family member.
It's okay to ask for help. In fact, it's a sign of strength to recognize when you need support. So we've covered cults, manipulative behavior, the psychology of persuasion. It's a lot to digest.
It is. But remember, the aim of this deep dive wasn't to make you paranoid or distrustful of everyone. It's about empowering you with knowledge. You can navigate the world with awareness and discernment.
And hopefully avoid those situations where someone's pushing your buttons and you end up feeling manipulated or taken advantage of.
That's the ultimate goal, to recognize the tactics, set those boundaries, and maintain your autonomy.
As we wrap up, I keep pondering this question: how can we as individuals promote a culture of healthy communication and ethical persuasion?
That's a fantastic question and a challenging one. I think it starts with taking personal responsibility. We each have a role to play in creating a world where manipulation is less prevalent.
So being mindful of our own communication patterns, making sure we're not using those manipulative tactics ourselves.
Exactly. It's about approaching communication with integrity and respect, even when we're trying to persuade someone, and it's about passing these principles on to future generations.
Empowering them to be critical thinkers and to recognize manipulation when they encounter it.
It's a long game, but I believe it's a worthwhile one.
Well said. We've explored so many facets of cult manipulation, the psychology of persuasion, but if there's one thing I hope you take away from this deep dive, it's this: knowledge is power.
And awareness is the first step to taking back control.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay empowered.